In the quiet before creation had fully settled into its rhythms, when the realms of gods and demons still pulsed with raw, unshaped desire, a subtle tremor stirred through the cosmic fabric, as though the universe exhaled in anticipation. It was in that suspended breath, neither dawn nor dusk, neither chaos nor order, that Tilottama's essence first shimmered into existence. She was not born in the way mortals understood birth. She was sculpted, woven, coaxed into being by hands that knew both the elegance of perfection and the dangers that beauty could unleash. From the glow of celestial fire, from the hush of secret night, from the fragile longing that lived somewhere between fear and fascination, the divine artisans shaped a form unlike any other. They gathered the most delicate attributes of every realm, the curve of moonlit waves, the warmth of deserts before sunrise, the whisper of lotus petals in motion, the stillness at the center of a thunderstorm. These fragments did not simply decorate her, they defined her nature, a living paradox of serenity and disruption. Tilottama was crafted to be exquisite, but her exquisiteness was not inert. It moved, breathed, radiated through the firmament with a slow, hypnotic cadence. Her presence did not merely please the eye, it altered the air around her, softened the hearts of those who approached, and made even the most disciplined minds tremble with unspoken wonder. To witness her was to feel a shifting within oneself, a gentle, yet undeniable awakening. It felt like remembering something intimate and ancient, something that had been buried under the weight of eternity, and now rose again, radiant and trembling. Those who caught only a glimpse of her found their thoughts lingering on the memory hours, days, even years later, as if her silhouette had etched itself into the very architecture of their souls. Yet beauty alone was not her purpose, nor the essence of her myth. The divine had not shaped her merely to delight the senses. They had forged her as an instrument, a beacon, perhaps even a warning. For in the heavens, where pride shimmered brighter than stars, and in the lower realms, where ambition burned hotter than molten stone, harmony was fragile. Conflict simmered beneath polite words, beneath gesture and ritual, beneath the illusion of order. And so Tilottama's creation carried an unspoken tension, an awareness that something so breathtaking could never exist without stirring the balance, without bending the will of gods and asuras alike. She was the embodiment of allure, yes, but also the embodiment of consequence, a living reminder that desire, once awakened, cannot be easily contained.
Legends whispered that the gods in their lofty halls debated the wisdom of bringing her into being. Some feared the chaos she could evoke, the rivalries she might ignite, the passions she could unearth in hearts both noble and corrupted. Others argued that beauty itself was a form of divine order, a manifestation of cosmic rhythm, and that Tilottama would be less a disruption and more a revelation. But creation had already begun, and even the wisest could not resist the unfolding of fate. Once the first glimmer of her consciousness pulsed, once the first breath of celestial fragrance escaped her lips, she became part of the very tapestry they sought to protect. Tilottama, for her part, understood none of this in the beginning. She awakened into an expanse of shimmering light, feeling the textures of existence brush against her like soft veils. She knew no names, no languages, but she sensed everything. Every ripple of emotion surrounding her, every tremor of awe, every secret fear. Her awareness unfurled like a blooming lotus, slow and luminous, each petal revealing another layer of perception. She felt the warmth of admiration touch her skin like a gentle breeze. She felt the tremors of desire curl around her like threads of fire. She felt the weight of expectation press softly at the edges of her spirit. All these sensations interwove into the first truth she ever grasped. Her existence was not simple. She was not neutral. She was a catalyst. But she did not fear this. Instead, Tilottama moved through her new reality with a quiet grace, as though she had always belonged to the universe, as though the cosmos itself had been waiting for her arrival. Her steps, if they could be called steps, seemed to leave behind a faint shimmer, like the afterglow of stars. Her breath carried the scent of something indescribable, a fragrance that was neither floral nor earthly, but rather the distilled emotion of longing itself. Wherever she drifted, the space brightened, warmed, or deepened, responding not to her will, but to her essence. She did not command attention. She received it naturally, effortlessly, as rivers receive the pull of gravity. But beneath this surface of serene enchantment lay a subtle vibration, an undertow felt most keenly by those who watched her creation from afar. The celestial artisans themselves, beings accustomed to crafting galaxies and shaping destinies, found their hearts stirring in ways they had not anticipated. They marveled at her, yes, but some also felt a quiet unease. Tilottama's beauty did not feel passive or decorative. It felt alive, as though it had been infused with the whispered desires of all who had contributed to her form. She was not merely an object of admiration. She was the mirror of emotion itself, reflecting and amplifying everything directed toward her.
In the high heavens, the great sages spoke her name with caution. They noted the resonance that followed her presence, the way conversations faltered when she appeared, the way eyes lingered too long, the way hearts beat faster without reason. She was divine, yes, but she was also deeply human in the sensations she evoked. In her, the separation between God and mortal, between cosmic and earthly, thinned to a delicate thread. And this thread, they knew, could easily snap. Still, despite their cautions,
there was something undeniably sacred in her existence. Sacred, not because she was flawless, but because she embodied the complexity of creation itself, the interplay of light and shadow, longing and fear, serenity and disruption. Tilottama was a reminder that even the cosmos was shaped by desire, that beauty was both a blessing and a test, and that the divine were not immune to the forces they themselves set in motion. She wandered through the celestial realms with the curiosity of a new soul, touching the edges of stars with her fingertips, feeling the hum of ancient chants beneath her feet. She admired the shifting colors of nebulae, the elegant sweep of divine architecture, the quiet devotion of sages deep in meditation. Everything fascinated her, yet she experienced it not with naive innocence, but with a deep sensual attunement. She felt the world through sensation, heat, light, breath, and vibration, each revealing new dimensions of emotion. Those who encountered her often found themselves speaking softer, moving slower, as though the very act of being in her presence required reverence. They would catch themselves studying the curve of her silhouette, the rhythm of her movements, the luminous depth of her eyes. And yet, she did not seek to entice. Her allure was simply who she was, an effortless emanation like the warmth of the sun. And so the myth began, not with conflict or grandeur, but with the quiet, irresistible blossoming of a presence unique in all the realms. Tilottama, born from beauty and destined for consequence, stepped into existence not with thunder, but with a whisper, one that would echo far longer than any storm.
Tilottama's presence did more than fill space. It shaped it, bent it, compelled it to respond. When she entered a chamber, the air shifted subtly, as though it recognized her before anyone else. Light behaved differently around her, softening near the curves of her silhouette, yet intensifying near the delicate lines of her face. Her aura was not something seen, but something felt. A quiet hum beneath the ribs, a warmth blooming unexpectedly in the chest, a pull that was neither commanding nor pleading, but impossibly natural. She moved with the confidence of one who had never been overlooked, not out of pride, but because existence itself acknowledged her as a focal point. Even the silence around her felt intentional, poised, listening. To describe Tilottama only in physical terms would be to miss the truth of her. Yes, her form shimmered with celestial perfection. Yes, her eyes held the shifting glow of dawn-touched water. Yes, her presence radiated a sensual stillness that made time feel slower. But what defined her more deeply was the emotional resonance she carried, the way she unlocked something in each being who gazed upon her. Some felt peace, others longing, others confusion or fear, but all felt something, and that something often lingered long after she passed. She was not merely observed, she was experienced. The first to step into her orbit was Indra, king of the Devas, ruler of the heavens, a being accustomed to reverence and obedience. When he saw Tilottama, a rare quiet overtook him. His kingdom often demanded authority, calculation, vigilance. His heart rarely found room for softness or wonder. Yet in her presence he felt a stillness settle deep within him, loosening the invisible armor he wore. She awakened in him a longing he could not easily categorize, a desire not for possession or conquest, but for connection, for a moment free of divine weight. Indra wanted from her something unnamed, something tender and unguarded. Yet within that yearning lay conflict. He knew that desire, even divine desire, could spiral into disorder. His heart, which had always served the heavens, now tugged in a direction he did not entirely trust. Next came Brahma, the creator, whose wisdom stretched farther than the boundaries of the cosmos. He had helped shape Tilottama, had contributed essence and intention to her formation. But the moment she stood before him, fully awakened, he realized he did not fully understand what he had helped bring forth. In her presence, he felt a soft ache, a reminder of the delicate balance between creation and unpredictability. Brahma did not desire her in the way others did. Instead, he sensed in her a reflection of the universe's most elusive patterns, a living embodiment of beauty's power to both inspire and destabilize. What he wanted from her was clarity, a glimpse into the mystery she carried. But the conflict within him stemmed from fear. Had he, in his pursuit of perfection, created even what the gods could not fully foresee?
Then came the Asuras, powerful and restless, their passions fierce and their ambitions unrestrained. Among them, the most deeply affected by Tilottama were Sunda and Upasunda, brothers bound by blood, strength, and an unbreakable bond forged through battles and shared desires. They had conquered realms side by side, ruled lands with a unity rare among Asuras. Yet the moment they beheld Tilottama, something trembled within that unity. In her presence, their hearts beat not in harmony, but in rivalry. She awakened in each of them a desire so potent it felt like destiny, a desire fueled not only by her beauty, but by the primal hunger she stirred. Unlike Indra's quiet longing or Brahma's contemplative ache, their desire burned hot, immediate, consuming. Sunda saw in her the embodiment of victory, the ultimate prize to elevate his power. Upasunda saw in her the promise of ecstasy, a union that could transcend even his own wild appetites. Both felt she was meant for them, and in that mirrored conviction lay the seed of conflict. Tilottama did not encourage either. She simply existed, and her existence alone was enough to fracture what once seemed unbreakable. They wanted her with equal intensity, and in that equality, the brothers unknowingly stepped toward the path of their own undoing.
But not all who gravitated toward Tilottama were divine or demonic in stature. Among celestial sages there was Narada, the wandering seer, whose voice carried wisdom and mischief in equal measure. When he encountered Tilottama, he experienced neither lust nor ambition, but fascination. Narada sensed the threads of fate swirling around her, threads that hummed with the promise of transformation. To him, Tilottama was not merely a woman or a creation. She was a crossroads, a living hinge upon which the future could pivot. What he wanted from her was understanding, the chance to witness how her presence would unearth truths hidden beneath pride, power, and pretense. His inner conflict came from foresight, for he knew that where beauty stirs hearts, it also exposes flaws, and the cosmos was far from ready to confront its own. Among mortals, too, stories of her presence began to drift like fragrance on the wind. Warriors spoke of a celestial woman whose gaze could melt anger. Poets claimed she walked through their dreams, offering verses that evaporated upon waking. Priests whispered that she embodied both temptation and purity, a paradox only the gods could resolve. None of these mortals truly saw her, yet the idea of her stirred their spirits. Tilottama awakened in them the longing for something beyond their reach, something both sacred and dangerously intoxicating. But what of Tilottama herself? How did she feel about those who gathered unknowingly around her? She sensed their desires and fears not with superiority, but with a kind of gentle empathy. She felt Indra's unspoken yearning and wondered at the vulnerability of a king. She felt Brahma's contemplative uncertainty and marveled at the Creator's hidden doubt. She felt the Asura brothers' burning hunger and shuddered at the storm rising between them. She felt Narada's curiosity and recognized in him a rare sincerity. She felt the distant prayers of mortals and understood the ache that lived in all who longed for beauty they could not possess. Tilottama herself was not driven by desire, but she was deeply affected by it. She learned the shape of longing through the hearts around her. She learned the weight of emotion through the intensity she evoked. And though she had been created with purpose, she began to feel the faint stirrings of her own questions. What did it mean to be the center of so many gazes? What did it mean to awaken conflict simply by existing? What did it mean to be desired, not for who she was, but for what she represented? In this quiet tension, Tilottama's essence deepened. She did not shrink from attention, but she did not relish it either. Instead, she carried it with a kind of solemn grace, aware that each heart she touched would soon shape the fate that awaited her. She became more than an object of beauty. She became a mirror reflecting the truths of those around her, truths they had long refused to confront. Indra's longing, Sunda and Upasunda's rivalry, Brahma's doubt, Narada's foresight, the mortal's dreams, each orbited her like celestial bodies around a star. Drawn by gravity they could neither resist nor fully comprehend. Tilottama, radiant and unintentional in her power, stood at the center of these converging desires, and though she did not yet know it, the emotions she awakened would soon ignite a story etched forever into the mythic tapestry, one woven with longing, conflict, and consequences that none of them could escape. Desire, once awakened, moves with its own will, quiet at first, like a distant tremor, then growing into something impossible to ignore. Around Tilottama, that tremor spread through every realm like a secret pulse. It wound itself around hearts that had long believed themselves immovable, pulled at loyalties forged in fire, whispered into the quiet spaces where fear and temptation lived side by side. Tilottama did not choose to ignite these stirrings. She merely breathed, and the world shifted. Indra was the first to feel the weight of his yearning evolve into conflict. At first, he had convinced himself that his attraction to Tilottama was simply admiration for divine craftsmanship. Yet the more he encountered her, passing through the gardens of paradise, appearing softly in the halls where sages gathered in thought, the more he felt the hollowness in that excuse. She stirred something deep beneath his kingly composure. When she entered a room, his control faltered. His pulse betrayed him. He found himself watching the way her presence seemed to soften the light, the way her breath created a subtle shimmer in the air, the way her quiet stillness drew him closer without a single beckoning word. But with that longing came fear. A king must stand unshaken, must not allow his desires to cloud judgment. Indra's realm depended on his clarity. Yet every time Tilottama's gaze brushed lightly against his, he felt the fragile boundary between duty and temptation thin. He wondered, dangerously, what it would be like to let that boundary break. He wondered what lay at the center of the warmth she evoked. His heart, once disciplined, now beat to an unfamiliar rhythm, one he tried to suppress but could not silence. Brahma watched this shift with quiet unease. He saw the tension growing in Indra's shoulders, the flicker of emotion in his eyes. He saw too the way Tilottama's presence loosened threads in the cosmic weave. Brahma felt no romantic desire toward her, yet her existence awakened something deeper: doubt. He, the creator, had crafted countless forms, but none had reflected the hidden vulnerabilities of the divine as starkly as Tilottama did. She became, unintentionally, a mirror revealing unspoken truths. Brahma's conflict stemmed from this recognition. Beauty had become a force he could shape, but no longer fully control. Her existence reminded him that creation always carried risk, and now desire fed that risk like flame meeting oil. But the conflict that burned brightest and most dangerously belonged to Sunda and Upasunda, the Asura brothers who once shared everything: victories, ambitions, dreams, found themselves unraveling in the wake of Tilottama's presence. The first time they saw her, they stood side by side, unified in awe, but awe quickly fractured into hunger. Like two flames meeting the same source of fuel, their desires roared toward the same center.
For Sunda, Tilottama represented triumph. Her beauty was not simply captivating, it was powerful, a symbol of divine artistry. If he could claim her, it would prove his superiority, not only among mortals and demons, but among gods. She would be his jewel, his conquest, the embodiment of his strength. His desire, though clothed in admiration, carried the sharp edge of possession. Upasunda, meanwhile, felt something far more primal. Tilottama ignited a sensual fire in him that he had never known before. Her presence stirred heat in his veins, a craving that lived just beneath his skin. He imagined her warmth close to his, imagined her voice soft against his ear, imagined the overwhelming intimacy of being near someone whose beauty seemed carved from the essence of longing itself. His desire was not strategic, it was visceral, consuming, intoxicating. Both brothers believed their yearning was justified. Both felt certain they were meant to possess her. And in that mirrored certainty, harmony turned to rivalry. Their stolen glances at each other grew sharp. Their conversations, once seamless, now held hidden jabs. When Sunda spoke of Tilottama's elegance, Upasunda's jaw tensed. When Upasunda described her grace, Sunda's eyes darkened. The bond that had made them formidable began to strain under the weight of a woman who sought none of their attention. Tilottama sensed this shift with a quiet dread. She felt the storm coiling between the brothers, each heartbeat echoing with unspoken challenge. At first she wondered if her presence alone could truly cause such fracture. But the more she witnessed, the quickening of their breaths around her, the tension in their stares, the unguarded hunger in their voices, the more she understood. Her existence did not create their rivalry. It revealed it, amplified it, drew it into the open like an exposed nerve. Narada, watching from the periphery with his ever-sharp gaze, recognized the danger long before others did. He saw the threads of fate tightening around the Asura brothers, their desires twisting into something darker with every passing day. Tilottama, he realized, was not choosing this path. She was simply the flame, and those around her were choosing how to burn. He felt a pang of pity for her. Though she moved with composure, he could sense the heaviness growing inside her. She had not asked to become the vessel of so much longing, but longing cared little for permission. Among the devas, whispers grew. Some admired her from afar, caught between reverence and restraint. Others feared the ripple her presence sent through divine order. Yet none could deny the truth. Tilottama was awakening emotions the heavens had long kept buried beneath protocol and pride. Mortals, too, felt the shift, even without seeing her. Dreams grew vivid, hearts grew restless. Poets awoke in the night with aching chests and no words to explain it. Something in the fabric of the worlds was changing, reverberating from the center of the woman crafted to embody perfection. But the deepest conflict lived within Tilottama herself. She felt the desire around her like heat, like trembling energy pressing against her skin. Indra's restrained longing was a soft pull, like warm wind against her neck. Sunda and Upasunda's hunger was harder, sharper, a chaotic force that made her pulse quicken, not in attraction, but in a kind of instinctive alarm. Brahma's unease brushed her spirit like a cool shadow. Narada's curiosity lay gentle, watchful, almost protective. She felt all of it, but beneath those external emotions lived her own awakening. Tilottama had never been taught how to feel desire, yet now she felt the stirrings of something unfamiliar, conflicting, fragile, and deeply human. Was it wrong to crave peace when so many craved her? Was it wrong to feel drawn to the quiet warmth she sensed in Indra's restrained heart? Was it wrong to fear the burning intensity of the brothers whose eyes clung to her like chains? She did not wish to choose. She did not wish to be chosen. She wished only to exist without shattering the world around her. But desire is a force that demands movement. It does not remain idle, especially when power and passion entwine. Day by day, Sunda and Upasunda's rivalry sharpened. Their touches became possessive when she passed by. Their voices grew rough with claim. Their arguments, once rare, erupted easily, each accusing the other of stepping closer, speaking softer, lingering longer. What had once been brotherhood now simmered with barely concealed hostility. Indra felt this shift too. He feared the violence brewing between the brothers, feared the consequences their desire would unleash. And though he kept his distance from Tilottama out of respect, that distance tore at him, leaving him silently yearning, painfully aware that restraint would not be enough to stop the approaching storm. Every look, every breath, every moment built upon the last, tightening the tension until the air around Tilottama felt charged, heavy, expectant, like the moment before lightning splits the sky. She had become the center of a web woven from longing, ambition, jealousy, and fear. And soon, inevitably, those threads would pull taut, snapping the final strands holding the realms in fragile balance. Desire was no longer just awakening. It was beginning to demand consequences.
The night of the climax came without warnings of thunder or celestial omens. It arrived quietly, folding itself into the world like a breath held too long, suspended between longing and disaster. The sky stretched deep and velvety, moonless, yet luminous with the faint glow of distant stars that seemed to pulse in time with the tension rising across the realms. Tilottama felt it before anyone spoke, an ache beneath her sternum, a hum along her skin, as though the universe itself were drawing her toward an inevitable point where desire and conflict would meet with no path of escape. She walked alone through a shimmering garden of the heavens, where lotus blossoms opened their pale, glowing petals to greet the night. Dew clung to her feet as she moved across the grass, each droplet sparkling briefly before fading into the warmth of her skin. She had come here seeking silence, a reprieve from the eyes that followed her, from the constant pull of longing that saturated the air around her. But even here, in this sanctuary carved from starlight, she could not outrun the storm gathering in the hearts of those drawn to her. She sensed them before she saw them, Sunda and Upasunda, their breaths heavy with tension, their footsteps echoing like twin drum beats. They emerged from opposite ends of the garden, each convinced he had been the first to seek her out, each fueled by a desire sharpened into something raw and volatile. Their eyes fixed on her,
and in that instant the fragile peace of the night fractured. Tilottama, Sunda breathed, his voice thick with hunger and need. Upasunda echoed, his tone darker, edged with a storm of emotion he no longer bothered to conceal. She stepped back, instinctively, but both moved forward as though pulled by invisible cords. The air tightened, vibrating with the heat of their desire. Tilottama felt her pulse quicken, not in attraction, but in the overwhelming pressure of their intensity. Their gazes pinned her in place, heavy, desperate, burning with vows they had never spoken aloud but carried like fire inside their veins. She opened her mouth to speak, but the brothers' attention flicked from her to each other, and in that shift the truth revealed itself. They were no longer speaking to her. They were speaking through her, for her, against each other. "You came to claim her for yourself," Sunda said, the accusation slicing through the air like a blade. Upasunda's jaw clenched. "I came because she deserves someone capable of holding her with devotion, not using her as a trophy." "You lie. You want her for the same reason I do. Do not pretend otherwise."
The garden stirred with the tension between them. Leaves trembled, petals quivered, light flickered in uneven waves, as though the stars themselves braced for the collision. Tilottama felt their desire spiraling out of control, tightening around her like vines, pulling her in opposite directions. She raised a hand, not to command them, but to steady herself, to breathe, to understand what this moment demanded. "You must stop," she whispered. Her voice trembled, soft yet carrying the weight of something dangerously fragile. "This is not the path you were meant to walk." For a moment silence fell. Her words drifted like a breeze across the garden, and yet instead of calming them, her plea cracked open everything they had been holding back. "I cannot stop," Upasunda said, stepping closer, his voice rough with the fire she had awakened in him. "I want you, your presence, your warmth, your gaze. I want to know you beyond the perfection the gods carved into your skin. I want to feel your breath beside mine." Sunda's breath came faster. "And I cannot stand aside while he speaks of you as if he were his alone. Tilottama, look at me." His voice deepened, trembling with a need he could no longer control. "You stir in me a desire stronger than battle lust, stronger than ambition. I dream of you. I burn for you." Their confessions clashed in the air, two fires colliding, feeding each other until the flames grew immense. Tilottama felt their heat pressing against her from both sides, threatening to consume everything. She took another step back, her breath unsteady. Desire does not give you the right to destroy each other. But what she saw in their eyes made her heart drop. Desire had already blurred into something darker: obsession, pride, an unyielding refusal to surrender. Both believed their longing was purer, stronger, destined. Neither could imagine letting the other win. And still, beneath the fear rising in her chest, Tilottama felt something else, something tender, aching, and unexpectedly intimate. She felt the world pressing its yearning into her skin, felt the weight of being not just desired, but needed. For the first time, she felt emotion swelling from within her, rather than flowing toward her from others. It was confusing, delicate, a spark she struggled to name. It was not for Sunda. It was not for Upasunda. It was for herself, her right to define who she was beyond the desires projected onto her. That realization shone through her eyes, and for a brief instant both brothers saw it. It was enough to drive them past the brink. "She chooses me," Sunda said, though she had not spoken a word. "No," Upasunda snarled, stepping so close the ground cracked beneath his feet. "She chooses me."
Their voices collided like thunder, and suddenly their hands were no longer reaching for her. They were reaching for each other, fists tightening, rage igniting, the desire they felt twisting into violence. Tilottama tried to intervene, moving between them with a desperate cry, but the force of their fury pushed her back. The brothers clashed with an intensity born from passion turned poison. Every blow landed with the heat of their longing, every strike fueled by the belief that the other stood between him and the woman who had become the center of every breath he took. Their battle was not merely physical, it was emotional, sensual, primal. It was a confession expressed through violence, every movement exposing a truth they could never admit. They needed Tilottama not because she was perfect, but because she awakened in them the terrifying vulnerability of being seen, of being undone. Tilottama watched them fight beneath a sky that pulsed like a living heart. The garden groaned beneath their rage. Lotus petals scattered like pale tears. The air trembled with the raw electricity of their overwhelming desire. Her own emotions surged uncontrollably. Fear, sorrow, compassion, anger, and above all the sharp, luminous understanding that she was not the cause of this destruction, but the mirror that revealed what had been inside them all along. She felt their pain in her bones, their longing in her breath, their unraveling in the flutter of her heart. "Stop!" she cried again, her voice breaking with a mixture of power and helplessness. For an instant her voice cut through the chaos. The brothers froze, chests heaving, eyes wild, bodies trembling with the remnants of their violent passion. They turned toward her, both of them, softened by the sound of her anguish. And in that suspended breath, Tilottama finally saw them as they were. Two souls undone by desire, two hearts so afraid of losing her that they had already lost themselves. But destiny once set in motion cannot be undone with a whisper. Their gazes flickered back to each other. Pride surged, fury flared, and with one final devastating roar, they lunged, each seeking to claim victory in the name of love, not realizing they were stepping into the embrace of their own doom. Tilottama, unable to stop them, felt the world tilt, the garden dimmed, the stars trembled. And as the brothers collapsed into the ultimate consequence of their intertwined violence, she felt a sensation rise in her chest, an overwhelming, heartbreaking awakening. It was not desire, it was grief. An emotion so deep it reshaped the air around her, softened the glow of the heavens, and left her standing in the ruins of a love she had never asked for, shaken by the force of the desire she had never sought to ignite. The climax had come, not in ecstasy, but in revelation, not in union, but in truth. And the truth was devastating, beautiful, and irreversible.
When the last echo of their clash dissolved into the trembling air, the sky above the divine court dimmed, as though the heavens themselves were holding their breath in the aftermath. The heat of desire, jealousy, and revelation still shimmered around the figures frozen in the wake of Tilottama's radiance. What had erupted in the climax, raw, unfiltered truth, had cracked open far more than ancient rivalries. It had exposed longing, fear, and the fragile threads binding gods, asuras, and creation itself. And now, as the dust slowly settled, the consequences began to unfurl like the petals of a night-blooming flower, heavy with dew and fate. Tilottama stood at the center of it all, not triumphant, not devastated, but transformed. The shimmering aura that had always flowed around her like a soft veil now carried a deeper gravity, a resonance forged in the fire of revelation. Her beauty remained untouched, too divine to be scarred, but something in her posture, in her gaze, signaled a shift. The seduction that once had been effortless now carried with it awareness, responsibility, and a faint tremor of sorrow. She had been created as a catalyst, sculpted to inspire change through desire, but now she understood fully what that meant. Her existence was a mirror that showed others their hidden selves, whether they wished to see it or not. The Asura brothers who had fallen into ruinous conflict at the peak of their desire and pride lay motionless on the ground, drained of the fury that had consumed them for so long. Their chests still rose and fell, shallow breaths betraying life but barely. Their eyes, once sharp with hunger and rivalry, now stared into nothingness, cleansed, emptied, or perhaps simply exhausted. In them, Tilottama saw the truth of what desire could do when untempered. It could blind, bind, or break. The Ajas who had witnessed the unfolding storm approached slowly, their expressions mixed, awe, uncertainty, lingering temptation, and relief. They had seen the force of her presence unmasked, stripped of divine intention and viewed in its raw, untamed form. Where they once admired her like a distant star, now they saw her as a force that shaped destinies with a touch, a breath, a glance. Not maliciously, but inevitably. Indra stepped forward first, the golden crown upon his brow dim in comparison to the glow that surrounded Tilottama.
He looked at her not with worship or desire, but with something far simpler, gratitude. He said, "The storm has passed," though the tremor in his voice betrayed the lingering echo of what he had felt in her presence. Tilottama lowered her gaze not out of submission, but out of a quiet understanding. She only revealed what was already there. Desire does not create conflict. It only unmasks the truths that lie beneath the surface.
Her words settled around them like fine dust, shimmering and heavy with meaning. None could deny that she had changed them, not through force, but through the silent pull of her existence. Every god, every asura, every mortal who had felt her presence had been shaped by it, willingly or not. And now she stood before them, radiant and humbled, aware of the weight she carried. Brahma approached next, his steps slow, contemplative. His gaze held neither desire nor fear, but the calm clarity of a creator witnessing the unfolding of a design whose complexity exceeded even his own intentions. "Tilottama," he said, his voice resonant and deep. "You were formed from the most exquisite fragments of creation. The beauty of flame, the softness of dawn, the shimmer of rivers, the whisper of petals. I sculpted you to bring balance, but in doing so, I awakened a force even I could not fully predict." She lifted her eyes to him, not as a creation meeting its maker, but as an equal acknowledging a truth. "You did not create my choices," she said gently, "only my form. What I awaken in others, that is theirs to confront." Brahma nodded, accepting the wisdom of her words. "And yet," he continued, "you have walked through chaos without yielding to it. You have seen the destruction your presence can provoke, and still you choose restraint, grace, and understanding. That is what sets you apart, not your beauty, but your heart." A soft warmth spread through Tilottama's chest at his words. Not pride, but a tender ache of recognition. For the first time she felt seen not as a masterpiece or a weapon of desire, but as a being capable of shaping her own path. Around them, the celestial court began to pulse with new energy. The consequences of what had unfolded were taking form. Not punishment, not victory, but transformation. The gods turned their gazes inward, considering the desires Tilottama had awakened in them. The Asura brothers would be returned to their realm, weakened yet changed, stripped of the blind rivalry that had consumed them. Perhaps in their vulnerability, they would find clarity where once there had only been fiery hunger. But the greatest shift of all occurred within Tilottama. As she stepped away from the center of the court, the air around her pulsed with quiet power. She understood now that she was no ornament, no silent catalyst. She was a being capable of reflection, compassion, and choice. She could no longer walk among the realms as a passive embodiment of a lure. She had seen too much, felt too much, learned too much. And so she made a decision, one that rippled through the divine halls like music.
I will not be bound to the role you crafted for me, she said softly, yet her voice carried across the entire court. I will walk my own path, shaped not by the desires of others, but by the truth I have found within myself. A hush fell over the gathered beings. Even the wind seemed to still. Indra bowed his head in acceptance. Brahma's eyes softened with approval. The other gods exchanged glances of awe, unease, and reluctant respect. Tilottama's declaration was not rebellion, it was evolution. She turned toward the horizon, where colors shifted in slow waves, blending dawn and dusk in a seamless dance. The sky welcomed her, as though it had been waiting for this moment, for her release, her self-choosing. Every step she took reshaped the air, leaving behind ripples of soft light. She felt neither exile nor triumph, only the quiet certainty of purpose. Her existence was no longer defined by how others reacted to her. It was defined by what she would create, awaken, and become through her own intention. Behind her, the gods remained silent, watching the birth of a new destiny. Ahead of her, the world opened like a vast, untouched field of stars, endless, inviting, and alive with possibility. Tilottama walked toward it with steady grace, the weight of desire no longer a burden, but a companion, a reminder of the beauty and danger of creation. She carried within her the lessons of longing, the scars of conflict, and the tenderness of awakening. She carried the power to lure, to shatter, to reveal, but also the choice of how to use that power. And as the divine court slowly returned to its rhythm, one truth lingered like a whisper in the wind. She had been crafted from fragments of perfection, but now she walked as something far more extraordinary, a being shaped by her own will, her own softness, her own awakening. Her path was no longer dictated by gods or destiny. It was her own.
There are tales that end with thunder, with the crack of finality, with gods sealing their decrees upon the world. But the story of Tilottama does not close with such force. It drifts instead into the quiet spaces where reflection blooms, where the echoes of desire soften into understanding, where beauty becomes not an instrument but a mirror, where creation reveals itself not as a moment but as an ever-unfurling truth. Hers is a myth that lingers like the final chord of a celestial song, suspended in the air long after the singers have fallen silent. In the wake of her departure from the divine court, a hush settled across the realms, not one born of fear or uncertainty, but of contemplation. Gods, asuras, and mortals alike found themselves returning to the memory of her presence, not with the burning hunger
that once clouded their judgment, but with a tempered, thoughtful awe. It was as though her existence had carved new paths within their hearts, subtle but irreversible. For Tilottama's journey was not merely the tale of desire disrupting celestial order. It was the revelation of a truth older than the gods themselves, that beauty, in its rawest form, is neither gift nor curse, but a force that demands self-knowledge. It draws out the hidden, the unspoken, the fragile. It illuminates not only what one longs for, but what one fears. And in doing so, it becomes a teacher, gentle or merciless, depending on what the heart carries. Her myth endures not because she was the most breathtaking being ever sculpted, but because she was the one who learned to rise beyond the gaze that defined her. She began as a creation shaped for a purpose, a divine instrument wielded to provoke change, yet she emerged as something far more powerful. A being who understood the weight of influence, the fragility of desire, and the quiet courage required to choose one's own path amidst expectations carved by others. There is a lesson woven into her shimmering essence, one that hums through the myths retold around fires, whispered in temples, murmured in the dreams of poets. It is the lesson that beauty is not merely that which is seen, it is that which reveals. The gods desired her because she reflected back to them the parts of themselves they had never dared confront. The Asura brothers clashed over her because she ignited long-buried rivalries and insecurities. Even the heavens themselves trembled not from her appearance, but from the truths her presence brought to light.
Desire, as her story teaches, is not the enemy. It is the spark. It awakens, enlivens, disrupts, and forces one to reckon with the shadows within. It is unpredictable, yes, and often frightening, but it is also the wellspring of transformation. Creation itself was born from longing, the longing of the void to be filled, the longing of the gods to understand themselves through form and color and life. Tilottama's existence is a testament to this ancient truth. She was crafted from the essence of dawn, dusk, flame, water, blossoms, each fragment itself a testament to creation's yearning. And yet, she became more than the sum of her components because she chose to understand desire instead of being ruled by it. She chose compassion where she could have wielded destruction, understanding where she could have chosen indifference, self-direction where she could have remained bound to divine intent. In the centuries that followed her awakening, stories spread across the realms of how she wandered the edges of creation, where the rivers kissed the forests, where mountains touched the clouds, where mortal songs drifted up to meet the stars. She became a silent witness to the tender, complicated dance between longing and restraint, not intervening, but observing, not judging, but understanding. Some say she gathered the sensations of the world like petals, soft and fragile, pressing them against her heart so she would never forget the lessons she had learned amidst the tempest of divine desire. In these tales, she is often depicted walking along the borders of reality, her steps forming constellations in the sand or awakening blossoms from deep sleep. There is no court around her, no gods vying for her attention, no asuras battling for dominance, only the quiet hum of existence and her own breath mingling with the wind. In the gentle solitude she chose, she discovered the most profound truth of all, that the greatest beauty lies not in being desired, but in knowing oneself beyond the gaze of others. This truth rippled outward, touching the hearts of those who heard her story. Mortals especially found solace in her tale. For who among them has not wrestled with longing, with being seen or unseen, with the fear of being defined by others? Who has not felt the pull of desire stir both joy and unease within them? Tilottama's myth became a mirror for their own struggles, a soft reminder that the storms within are not signs of weakness, but invitations to understand one's own depths. For the gods, her story became a quiet warning. They learned that even their greatest creations carry their own will, subtle at first, but powerful once awakened. They learned that desire, when wielded without reflection, can spiral beyond divine control. And they learned, perhaps with a touch of humility, that beauty is not theirs to possess, only to witness. As for the Asuras, her tale evolved into a parable of restraint. The conflict between the brothers became a reminder that desire without introspection leads only to ruin. Their downfall was not written in their nature, but in their refusal to see beyond their hunger. In this way, Tilottama taught them more in her silence than any blade or decree ever could. And somewhere in the vast stretch of creation, Tilottama herself continued walking, no longer burdened by the expectations that once shaped her destiny. There are stories of her pausing beside a quiet lake, gazing into the rippling reflection, not to admire her beauty, but to study the woman she had become. There are tales of her offering comfort to wandering souls, not with words, but with the simple grounding presence of one who understands longing intimately. There are whispers that she sometimes dances beneath the moon, letting the silver light trace the sinews of her existence, as though reminding her that she too is part of the grand tapestry she once thought she merely adorned. Her myth concludes not with a grand event, but with a feeling, with the soft, haunting afterglow of having witnessed something both fragile and immense. Tilottama reminds us that desire is neither divine wrath nor mortal weakness. It is the pulse that moves creation forward. It is the spark that lights the shadows. It is the thread that weaves the story of who we are becoming. The power of beauty, too, is not in its ability to captivate, but in its ability to reveal. True beauty does not bind, it frees. It shows us the contours of our innermost truths, even the ones we fear to face. And the force of creation is perhaps the most unpredictable of all, for it shapes and reshapes itself endlessly through the desires, choices, and awakenings of those who inhabit it. Tilottama's tale leaves us not with certainty, but with reflection, not with closure, but with an open horizon. Her story is a reminder that every heart, god, asura, or mortal, carries within it a quiet battlefield, a tender longing, a hidden truth waiting to be seen. And that within the interplay of desire and awareness, beauty and consequence, lies the path to understanding oneself. Her myth lingers like the first touch of dawn upon the skin, warm, delicate, full of promise. It breathes like a sigh after a long night, soft and unhurried. It invites us to step into our own depths, to listen to the unspoken desires that shape us, to face the storm and the stillness within. And as the final whisper of her story fades into the ancient wind, one truth remains suspended in the quiet. Beauty may guide us, desire may awaken us, but it is awareness that transforms us. Tilottama walks into the horizon still, an eternal reflection of creation's yearning and reminder that even the most divine beings must one day choose who they wish to become.